They were just two teenage girls with a secret. But on a quiet afternoon in 1954, they committed one of the most brutal murders New Zealand had ever seen, and smiled about it. This is the disturbing case of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume. It all began in Christchurch, New Zealand, during the early 1950s. At first glance, the city seemed peaceful and ordinary. The streets were clean, the people polite, and crime was rare. No one would expect that two young schoolgirls, both from very different backgrounds, would soon become the center of a murder that would shock the entire country and, eventually, the world. Pauline Parker was born on May 26, 1938. She came from a working-class family. Her mother, Honora Parker, was a homemaker, and her father, Herbert Reaper, worked at a fish shop. Though she was a quiet and serious girl, Pauline often felt out of place, especially at school. She didn't have many friends and struggled with a bone infection in her leg when she was younger, which kept her isolated and left her with a permanent limp. Then there was Juliet Hume, born on October 28, 1938, in London. She had a completely different life. Her father, Dr. Henry Hume, was the rector of Canterbury University College, and her mother, Hilda Hume, was known for her beauty and strong personality. Juliet was intelligent, outspoken, and proud. She had traveled across the world, spent time in South Africa and England, and carried herself like someone older than her years. But Juliet also had a history of health problems. She had been diagnosed with tuberculosis as a child and was often sent away to warmer climates to recover. Like Pauline, she spent long periods away from other children, which left her lonely and desperate for connection. The two girls met in 1952 at Christchurch Girls High School. Their friendship was instant and intense. It started with shared interests, music, books, movies, but soon became something deeper, almost obsessive. They created fantasy worlds, complete with imaginary kingdoms and characters. One of these was called Barovnia, where they ruled as queens and wrote detailed stories set in this magical land. In their private world, they were important, powerful, and understood, something they didn't feel in real life. Their bond grew stronger each day, and over time, they became inseparable. By 1953, their families began to worry. Pauline's mother noticed that her daughter was becoming more secretive and moody. Juliet's parents were concerned about how close the girls had become. They shared a bed during sleepovers, spoke in strange voices, and seemed to live more in their fantasy than in the real world. Some people believed the girls were in a romantic relationship. Others thought they were just overly imaginative teenagers, but no one expected what would happen next. In the girls' minds, the world around them was a problem. Teachers didn't understand them, parents didn't support them, and most of all, they believed that society wanted to tear them apart. The real trigger came in early 1954 when Juliet's parents decided to separate. Her father, Dr. Hume, was resigning from the university and planned to return to England. Juliet, who had been told she would go with him to South Africa to recover from her illness, was now facing the reality that she would be leaving New Zealand alone. Worse, Pauline would be left behind. Both girls were devastated. Their private world, their plans, their fantasy kingdom, everything they had built together was at risk. In their diaries, they began writing about how unfair it was that people wanted to break them up. They believed that only one person stood in the way of their freedom: Pauline's mother, Honora. What began as emotional frustration quickly turned dark. Instead of talking about how to convince Honora to let Pauline leave with Juliet, they started to plan something else, something permanent. Pauline's diary entries during this time are chilling. On June 19, 1954, just 3 days before the murder, she wrote, "We discussed our plans for moitering mother." She even spelled murder incorrectly, which only added to the strange, almost childlike way the girls were thinking. But they weren't joking. Their plan was real. On June 22, 1954, everything changed. That morning, Pauline had breakfast with her family, like it was any normal day. She and Juliet had arranged to meet at Juliet's house, Elam. There, they had tea and cake and spent time writing in their diaries. The plan was already in motion. Later that day, Honora arrived to take Pauline and Juliet for a walk in Victoria Park. The girls had brought a half-brick wrapped in an old stocking, something they had carefully prepared earlier and hidden in Juliet's handbag. Their plan was to lure Honora to a quiet spot in the park and kill her by surprise. As they walked through the park, the girls chatted and laughed. They waited for the right moment. Then near a tea house at the end of the trail, they dropped a pink stone on the ground. That was the signal. When Honora bent down to pick it up, Pauline pulled out the brick-filled stocking and struck her mother from behind. Juliet joined in. Together, they attacked Honora again and again. The violence was overwhelming. Honora fought back, but the girls didn't stop until she was no longer moving. After the murder, the girls ran back to the tea house, screaming that something terrible had happened. They told the workers that Honora had fallen and hit her head, but when help arrived, it was clear that this was no accident. Honora's face was severely beaten. Blood was everywhere. Her injuries didn't match the story, and the girls, despite their claims, showed no signs of panic. The police were called, and the truth started to unfold. The moment police arrived at Victoria Park, they knew something was wrong. The scene didn't match the story Pauline and Juliet had told. Honora, Parker's injuries were far too violent to be caused by a simple fall. Her head had been struck multiple times, and there were deep wounds to her face and skull. Blood had soaked into the ground, and one of her false teeth had even been found several feet away. The brutality of the scene was impossible to ignore. The girls were taken in for questioning almost immediately. At first, they stuck to their story. They claimed that Honora had slipped, hit her head on a rock, and died. But police weren't buying it. Their clothes had blood on them. Their hands were shaking, not with fear, but from exhaustion. They weren't crying. In fact, they seemed strangely calm. Investigators separated the two girls and questioned them individually. That's when the lies began to fall apart. Under pressure, Pauline eventually admitted that she and Juliet had planned the attack. She confessed that they had brought the weapon with them and had agreed ahead of time to kill Honora. When asked why they did it, her answer left detectives stunned. "We were afraid she would stop us from being together." The police immediately searched Juliet's home and Pauline's belongings. What they found made the case even more chilling. Pauline had kept detailed diary entries, daily records of her thoughts and fantasies, but among the usual teenage writings were cold, clear references to murder. She described how she and Juliet had practiced acting, crying, and pretending to be shocked. She wrote how excited they were about their plan. On June 20th, she wrote, "We have worked it out carefully, and we are both thrilled with the idea." Her diary also revealed the twisted way they saw the world. The girls believed they were above other people. They saw themselves as special, chosen, even godlike. In their minds, the rules of society didn't apply to them. Pauline once wrote, "The world is not honest, and we have to live by our own rules." Meanwhile, the press had gotten wind of the story, and it spread like wildfire. Newspapers called it a thrill killing. Reporters described the two girls as cold-blooded murderers, driven by obsession and fantasy. For a quiet country like New Zealand, which rarely saw violent crime, this case was beyond shocking. People couldn't understand how two girls, smart, polite, well-educated, could do something so brutal to someone as kind as Honora Parker. Public opinion was divided. Some people blamed the girls' friendship, calling it unnatural. Others pointed fingers at their parents for not noticing the warning sign. Rumors spread that the girls had been in a romantic relationship, and many saw that as the reason for the murder. At the time, same-sex relationships were considered shameful and even criminal in many parts of the world. These rumors only added fuel to the fire. Psychologists were brought in to examine both Pauline and Juliet. Their findings were complex. While both girls were highly intelligent and emotionally intense, they were not considered insane. The doctors concluded that the girls were aware of what they had done and knew it was wrong, but their deep bond had created a kind of shared world where fantasy and reality had become so mixed that they believed murder was a solution. The term folie à deux was quietly discussed among the medical experts. It's a rare condition where two people share the same delusional belief and support each other in dangerous behavior. Though not officially used in the court, many believed that this was exactly what had happened between Pauline and Juliet. By July 1954, just a few weeks after the murder, the girls were formally charged with the murder of Honora Parker. Because they were under 18, they could not be sentenced to death. The trial was set to begin later that year. The public waited anxiously, and when the trial opened in Christchurch's Supreme Court on August 23, 1954, every seat was filled. During the trial, both girls pleaded not guilty. Their defense teams did not deny the murder, but tried to argue that they were mentally ill and should not be held fully responsible. The prosecutors, however, showed no mercy. They read Pauline's diary entries out loud in court. Words like "moitering mother" echoed through the courtroom. The jury listened as the story of two girls lost in fantasy, plotting murder like a game, unfolded before them in chilling detail. The courtroom was silent when the jury returned with their verdict. The jury found both girls guilty of murder. It was a unanimous decision. On September 28, 1954, Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume were officially convicted. The court accepted that they had planned the killing together, carried it out together, and never once tried to stop each other. Though they were only teenagers, Pauline was 16 and Juliet just 15, the judge made it clear that their age did not excuse the brutal nature of their crime. However, because of their young age, the law did not allow for a death sentence. Instead, the girls were sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. This meant that there was no fixed prison term. Their release would be decided later by government officials and prison authorities. The sentence left the public with mixed feelings. Some people were angry, believing the girls deserved life in prison. Others thought they were mentally unwell and needed help, not punishment. After the trial, Pauline was sent to Parker-Hulme prison, just outside of Christchurch. Juliet was transferred to Mount Eden Prison in Auckland. Despite their intense bond, the girls were never allowed to see or contact each other again. The government believed their relationship was dangerous and could lead to more violence if they ever reunited. For the next 5 years, the girls lived in complete separation. Their lives inside prison were quiet and controlled. Pauline reportedly became deeply religious. She spent much of her time reading, reflecting, and writing. Juliet, too, focused on her education. Despite the crime, both girls were known to be well-behaved in prison. They caused no trouble and showed signs of improvement. In 1959, after serving just 5 years, both Pauline and Juliet were released on the condition that they never contact each other again. The decision was controversial. Many in New Zealand were shocked that such a violent crime could lead to such a short sentence. But the law at the time left little room for longer punishments for minors, and because both girls had behaved well and shown signs of reform, the authorities believed they no longer posed a threat. After their release, both girls disappeared from public view. Pauline changed her name to Hilary Nathan and moved to England. She lived a quiet, private life and later became a Catholic. She spent time working in a home for troubled youth, though she rarely spoke about her past. When questioned, she expressed deep regret for what she had done and insisted that she had changed. Juliet, on the other hand, took a different path. She moved to the United States, then to Scotland. There, she adopted the name Anne Perry and began writing novels. She became a successful and well-respected author, known especially for her historical crime fiction. Her books sold millions of copies around the world. For decades, no one knew that Anne Perry was actually Juliet Hume, the girl who had helped kill her friend's mother. The secret remained hidden until 1994, when a journalist investigating the case connected the dots. The news broke worldwide. Readers were stunned to learn that a popular crime writer had once committed a real-life murder. Juliet confirmed the truth in a television interview, but refused to go into detail. She said the crime had been a terrible mistake and that she had lived with guilt ever since. Even with this revelation, her career did not collapse. Many of her readers continued to support her, saying that she had paid her debt to society. Others, however, were deeply disturbed. The idea that someone could write about crime and justice while hiding such a dark past unsettled many people. As for Pauline, she remained silent. She had no interest in the spotlight and refused all interviews. Her neighbors and friends in England had no idea about her history until the story broke in the media. Some were shocked. Others said they had always found her quiet and kind. No one could have guessed what she had done as a teenager. The case of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hulme remains one of the most disturbing in New Zealand's history, not just because of the crime itself, but because of the people who committed it. Two teenage girls, no signs of violence in their past, no history of abuse or trauma, just an intense friendship that turned into something deadly. Even after decades, the murder of Honora Parker continues to be studied and discussed, not only in New Zealand, but by criminologists, psychologists, and writers all over the world. The case wasn't just shocking because of its violence. It was disturbing because of who committed the crime and why. Two teenage girls from educated families without any previous signs of violence had calmly and deliberately killed someone close to them. At the heart of it all was their strange, intense bond. Experts have described their relationship as a textbook example of shared psychosis. Though it was never formally used in court, the condition known as folie à deux, where two people share the same delusion and feed off each other's beliefs, fit their behavior perfectly. Both Pauline and Juliet were imaginative and isolated in their own ways, and when they found each other, it created a world where no one else mattered. In that world, anything became possible, even murder. Their fantasy kingdom, Barovnia, wasn't just a childish game. It had rules, hierarchies, and gods. They saw themselves as part of that imagined world more than the real one. They believed they were special, even chosen, and anyone who got in the way of their connection had to be removed. Pauline's diary even showed how they saw the killing of Honora as a necessary step, not a crime. They thought it would bring them closer together and free them from control. What's even more chilling is how matter-of-fact they were after the murder. There were no tears, no breakdowns, no signs of guilt, at least not at first. Their calm reactions made people uncomfortable. Reporters at the time described Juliet as cold and disconnected during the trial. Pauline seemed more emotional, but also detached from the horror of what had happened. It was as if they were still living inside their story, watching the events unfold like a scene in one of their fantasy tales. The public struggled to understand how this could happen. Parents worried about the power of imagination, books, and even movies. Some blamed their families. Pauline's home life was described as strict and cold, while Juliet's parents were seen as distant and unstable. But there was no single answer that explained everything. The case forced people to question how much influence relationships can have on young minds, and how quickly fantasy can turn into something dangerous when left unchecked. In the years following their release, both women remained mostly silent about the case. Juliet, now known as Anne Perry, gave a few interviews later in life where she admitted to the crime, but described it as a moment of madness. She insisted she had changed and had spent her life trying to do good. Pauline, or Hilary Nathan, refused to speak publicly, except for a few brief statements where she expressed deep remorse. Neither woman ever tried to contact the other, as ordered by the court, and according to all available information, they kept that agreement for the rest of their lives. Despite their silence, the world did not forget. The murder was the subject of books, studies, and films. The most famous was Heavenly Creatures, a 1994 movie directed by Peter Jackson, which brought the story back into public attention. The film was praised for its haunting portrayal of the girls' friendship and the events that led to the killing. But it also stirred controversy, especially after Juliet's identity as Anne Perry was revealed that same year. People now saw the movie differently, knowing that one of the real girls was alive and writing crime stories for a living. Even today, the debate continues. Were Pauline and Juliet victims of a rare mental condition? Were they dangerous from the start? Or was it just a perfect storm? Two lonely girls, bound by imagination, pushed to the edge by fear of separation. There are no clear answers. What remains undeniable is this: Honora Parker lost her life in the most brutal way, not at the hands of a stranger, but by her own daughter and her daughter's closest friend. That betrayal, the kind that can't be explained by logic or excused by youth, is what makes this case so haunting. It was not just a crime, it was the destruction of trust, family, and reality itself. As the years passed, the story of Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume never fully faded. Even though both women lived quiet lives under new names, the crime they committed as teenagers followed them for the rest of their lives. The shock may have faded in the public, but the mystery, the emotion, and the disturbing questions never truly went away. Juliet Hume, under her new identity as Anne Perry, continued to publish novels for decades. Her first book, The Cater Street Hangman, came out in 1979 and was well received. Over time, she wrote more than 50 books, many of them bestsellers, all centered on crime, justice, and moral struggle. Her readers, unaware of her past, praised her detailed plots and deep characters. She became one of the UK's most successful historical fiction authors. But when her identity was exposed in 1994, everything changed. Suddenly, readers, critics, and interviewers were asking not about her books, but about the murder. In a rare interview, Juliet admitted her involvement, but insisted that she had been mentally unwell at the time. She said she had accepted her punishment and spent her life trying to be a better person. She spoke about her faith and the deep guilt she carried. Still, not everyone was willing to forgive. Some readers stopped buying her books. Others defended her, saying she had paid her debt and had built a meaningful life afterward. It remained one of the most controversial reveals in modern literary history. Pauline Parker, or Hilary Nathan as she came to be known, never returned to public life. After her release from prison, she settled in a remote part of England and stayed out of the spotlight. Very little is known about her later years. She reportedly worked with disabled children for a time and became active in her local church. Unlike Juliet, she never gave public interviews or wrote about her past. Her only known comment was given through a family member, saying she was deeply sorry and would live with the consequences of her actions forever. She lived in quiet isolation, far from the world that once knew her as a teenage killer. In 2023, Anne Perry, formerly Juliet Hume, passed away at the age of 84. Her death reopened public interest in the case, as journalists and former readers reflected on her life, her crime, and her legacy. Some remembered her as a brilliant writer who had turned her life around. Others couldn't forget that as a 15-year-old, she had helped take a woman's life. With her death, many of the remaining questions went unanswered. As for Pauline, her current status remains uncertain. Some sources say she is still alive, living quietly under legal protection. Others believe she may have passed away in recent years. Because of privacy laws and the seriousness of the crime, there is no confirmed information about her final years. Today, the case remains one of the most studied in New Zealand's criminal history. It is still used in law schools and psychology courses around the world. The story of two girls who loved each other so much that they were willing to kill is as disturbing now as it was in 1954. It challenges our understanding of youth, mental illness, friendship, and morality. Even now, people continue to ask the same haunting questions. How could two teenage girls come to believe that murder was the answer? Did they truly understand what they were doing? And more importantly, could it happen again? The murder of Honora Parker wasn't just the result of one bad decision. It was the end point of a long and dangerous journey, built on fantasy, isolation, and a bond that became more powerful than reason. For many, that's the most terrifying part, not the crime itself, but how close it came to being overlooked. In the end, what happened in Christchurch in June 1954 is more than just a case. It is a warning about what can happen when reality is replaced with delusion, and when two minds become trapped in a world of their own. Let us know what you think about this chilling case in the comments. Do you believe that Pauline and Juliet were simply disturbed teenagers? Or is there something even darker at the heart of their story? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life stories that reveal the most hidden corners of the human mind.